Hello and welcome everybody. Today we're meeting with Max. Max is a music teacher, specifically a guitar guy.
Mhm.
He travels, he teaches. He's got a pretty interesting story himself, especially teaching music online. So without further ado, hello, Max.
Hey,
Where are you
thanks
coming
for
from
having me on.
today?
I'm outside of Baltimore in Maryland.
Ah, very cool. Um, and so, for those people who aren't familiar with you at all, how did you get your start teaching online?
I was working at a music school, like a store with a music school, uh, starting in 2000, summer 2019, and that was all in person. And I was teaching about five or six instruments, and I had a ton of students. It was pretty all over the place, and obviously everything shut down the next, spring, right?
Right.
Including what I was doing in person. So that went remote around May that year. So in the summer, we had some time off while they adjusted. And at first, I was a little bit apprehensive towards teaching music remote. I wasn't sure how it would go. And I'd known for a while, like even musicians that I'd followed on social media, even as a teenager, I remember seeing some of them post that they're offering Zoom lessons. So I've known that that's a thing. Um, but I wasn't sure how I would do it, and it it went pretty smooth. It took an adjustment for everybody, but it was pretty smooth. And I had students asking me at the beginning, "When are we going back to in person?" And then that has stopped. People don't ask anymore because I still have a lot of those original students with me. Um, it's been a nice adjustment to not rush anywhere with gas, and if it's a snowstorm or it's raining or if someone's a little bit sick, we don't have to worry about, but not incapacitated sick. We don't have to worry about any of that, those issues that don't become an issue on Zoom. What I
I
say is there's
totally
pros and
understand
cons to
that.
both. Yeah, but the pros to online are pretty good. So
Yeah. A lot of teachers teach online, or have tried it,
Mhm.
but I've always heard music is one of those things that's harder to teach online. Um, because the sound delay might be there or something along those lines. That's the main reason I've always heard. So how do you combat the downsides for all the upsides, obviously, that you've mentioned?
so it's interesting, but I've always been the type of teacher that, like, I customize my teaching to everybody. So everybody gets their own unique experience based on what their goals are and what they're actually interested in. And one of the main downsides is jamming together, because that is part of the prescription for certain people would be to jam together. Um, but what I've started to do is use backing tracks and have them play along with the track, because one of the upsides to remote lessons that I noticed from the beginning is that there is no hiding. Like in a room, especially if you're playing together, it is easy to, if you haven't been practicing or if something's to kind of like get by. And even as a music student myself, as a teenager, or whatever, like I had figured that out certain times. So as a teacher, I'm well aware of that and how that can go. But in online lessons, like my attention is isolated on you. And so I'm hearing everything. I'm hearing all the progress, and sometimes I can close my eyes and hear in guitar like how well the note is sounding without even needing to see it, you know? Um, so it honestly wasn't as much of an issue as I thought it would be, because a lot of things that we work on, I can just hear how the student has been progressing on it, and I can put them on a track.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, I remember I took guitar lessons myself once in person. Never tried it online yet. But
Mm.
uh, but yeah, learning the fingers and things like that. So how do you work with students on the physical aspects of it when you're remote like that?
I explain it and I demonstrate. You know, with the guitar, I can show them. Okay, so here is how we're gonna fret a note, and I can show all the different angles. I can even I have a removable webcam, so I can move it and really show my finger.
Ah,
And I mean, it's not all that different. But then, like I say, okay, see, that's the part of my finger that's hitting the string. See, it's not quite below the nail, but it's not quite on the print, right? And
yes.
to get extra natural pressure, this is a 90% of the time rule. There's exceptions to it, but we want kind of that final joint of the finger to be as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. Such as if you're building a house, right? The four foundations, you're not going to put it at an angle, you're going to put it at a 90-degree angle. So our finger gets natural pressure from that. And I explain it very slowly. I go at everybody's pace because I work with kids and I work with adults and teenagers. So with kids, sometimes getting a note, most kids get it within a lesson, but some kids, it takes a while to even get a sound, especially if
Mm.
they're young and their guitar, if they have a cheaper guitar, they often are a little harder to push down. Um, and then the thicker strings are a little bit more, right? Um, but there's a clear difference between this sound
Yeah.
and
And the
the
clearer,
clear
crisper
sound,
sound. Yeah, yeah.
right? And so we know when we got it.
Yes, that's
So,
awesome. Like I'm in the ESL world, and I can see that even you with the guitar with the music are very attuned to using the TPR to showcase exactly what you're doing. You've got your highlighter there showing everything from the
mm,
positioning, and you can zoom in. I like your removable camera. That's awesome.
mm.
So, how did you get your start teaching overall? Like, where did this come from? Your dream for teaching?
Well, my mom has always been a teacher in school. She actually worked at my high school for a bit, so that was kind of fun going to school and my mom was working there. She was a reading teacher, um, and I've always had a knack for teaching. I remember even definitely as a college student and probably younger, teaching friends instruments for fun, or like, here's how to play this chord progression on piano, here's how to play this little melody. Um, and a lot of people don't have the patience to explain something to someone, especially explaining something that's confusing
Mhm.
to someone. But I'm a naturally patient person, so that really plays in my favor.
Awesome. What are your teaching specialties? I've heard you
And
now mention guitar and piano.
yeah, I mean, I play about five instruments myself, but that includes ukulele and bass, which are the same as guitar, pretty much. A string instrument like that. Violin is different; it doesn't have frets, and it's a little bit different. But like guitar, bass, ukulele, they're all in the same family. They have the same strings, the same notes. Um, but piano was my first instrument. Picked up saxophone in sixth grade. I didn't really pick up guitar till between eighth and ninth grade. So guitar is not my first instrument, but it's definitely the one I play the most and have composed on the most and all of that.
Very cool. So, what are your top three things that you like about online teaching?
I like the flexibility of um, time and location and um, the flexibility. Let's just say that it's very flexible, which I enjoy. And I like that it really allows me to connect with the whole country. You know,
Hmm.
it's a little bit harder to expand into Canada, and I'm a dual citizen, so I have a lot of. I went to school in Canada, so I have a lot of friends and connections in Canada. But the exchange rate makes that difficult. It's about 100 extra. It's like pretty crazy. Um, so it's hard to sell to Canadians. Although I would love to expand internationally, but I can work with people in California, um, Florida, Colorado, like anywhere. And you can't do that in person, of course. So I think I really love the reach that it gives me.
Cool. Have you worked with other online teachers before, either teaching music or other things?
Yeah, so what really helped me grow my studio when I went private was I hired a business coach who helps musicians who are, usually already teaching at least a few private students build their studio into more of a structured business with policies and support and group calls and marketing strategies. And so I know I'm connected with a gigantic community of pretty much mostly remote, but a lot of the teachers are in person too. It's just you'd have to be in that location. But basically, I can offer to anyone watching this, if you want to learn any instrument, I can probably find you a teacher pretty quickly. I'm in a bunch of online networks with teachers all over the world, really. Like there was a guy in that coaching program from Australia, which is pretty cool, and someone from Mexico. Um, but most of us are from the states. Um, and there was one part of the marketing strategy involved working with another teacher, and you make posts on each other's behalf. And
Hmm.
so that got me working. We do like very short weekly calls to check in about that strategy. That got me in touch on a regular basis with some other music teachers who did different things than me, which is really interesting. To those calls often turn into like just chatting about how we run our studios and our students and all of that. So that was pretty interesting to be a part of this world of other music teachers, and we all have different styles. And with one of those teachers too, we did a lesson exchange so that when we do talk about each other, we actually know what it's like to take a lesson with the other. And we have a very similar philosophy and style, so that worked very well.
It's very cool. Yeah. I've heard over and over again, especially even in the course of interviews for the summit, that the need for a coach, for a mentor is just paramount to grow. Anybody can get started, but to move to whatever you want your next level to be, sometimes it's really important to get that coach, that guide to really help you. Um, what advice would you give to somebody who's first starting out as an online teacher, whether it's with music or something else?
Definitely find a coach for sure. Have a mentor. There's no need to do it on your own. You totally can, but it's like that saying: you can go fast alone, but you can go farther with a community. Something like that, right? That might not be
Yep.
word for word. So definitely find some kind of coach. In the meantime, of course, there's YouTube University, and but there's also a ton of Facebook groups. So there's probably a bunch of Facebook groups and online communities for what you're looking to do already. You just have to dig a little bit. You might not find them your first search, but if you keep searching, you will find them. And other than that, well, one more thing on that is you never want to be the smartest person in a room. So if you do surround yourself with other people that are a few steps ahead of you to your goal, you're going to be able to learn from them, and they'll share with you some of their mistakes, and you'll be able to avoid them. And then you can do the
Oh,
same for other people. But
mhm.
otherwise, of course, you need to be clear on what you want, because if you want to, for example, tutor 18 different subjects, it's going to be hard to market that. It's going to be hard to zero in on your ideal client. And you can always expand a bit later once you have a solid client base, although in general, the rule is simplicity. Be clear on what you want. You might have to sit with yourself. You might have to cut some things that you do want to do. You can always make separate services, but to have a clear message, it's best to have one offering. Even me, I used to offer, even online, I started out, my flyer said saxophone, guitar, bass, and piano. And that just became and ukulele. That just became too overwhelming. Bass doesn't work great unless you have a good microphone over Zoom. Um, Piano, I'm I'm not the best piano player, so I'm really just a basic teacher, and it's easier if I move locations. Like sometimes I'd visit my parents' house or whatever. Like they didn't always want to bring my piano with me. So I still have one grandfathered in piano student, and I've stopped advertising for ukulele, but I have one grandfathered in ukulele student. Um, what helped me just like relax and be able to focus on my strengths was simplification into just guitar. So
That's
that's my
awesome. Yeah.
advice. Find support, find a community, and seek it out and be patient with that because you might not find it in the first week, right? But if you keep searching, you will find it. And be clear, concise, and specific on what you want to teach and what you offer. And be honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses.
Definitely. Yeah. Having a niche is really important because, yeah, it helps you focus. It's tough. It's tough, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, especially with music, switching
Mm-hmm.
from your mentality from instrument to instrument on a lesson. If one lesson is a guitar, the next is the piano, the
Mm-hmm.
next is the ukulele, and back to the guitar, and circling all over the place and making sure you have all the props that you need or
Mm-hmm.
instruments that you need for each lesson.
Yeah, it got to be a bit much.
I bet. Especially probably, I don't know how big your piano is, or lugging that around if you're traveling a little
Yes, it's a decent size.
bit. So let's talk about motivating students for a minute here. So engagement, motivation. So can you give us some insight on how you do that, since it's a little bit different what you're doing with
Mm-hmm.
music?
So it's definitely different, but I do think a lot of what I say is gonna be transferable to other things. Um, the biggest thing for me is making sure that they're engaged and interested and actually doing something that they like from internal, from the internal, like from inside. That they're not feeling like they're forced to be there, that they're not feeling like picking up the guitar is a chore, that they're actually doing it out of joy and personal exploration. And even if they do have, I mean, life gets busy, right? If you have a period where you're not able to practice for a week or two or whatever, which happens, it happens to me, happens to everybody. um, that you're still able to find joy in music, because I do tell people, like, let's make this really simple. Like, if you listen to music in the car and you're tapping your foot along to the beat, or you're making extra care to pay attention to what the bass and the drums are doing in each specific section, that's using the same parts of your brain as when you're playing the instrument. That's still engaging with the music, and I do consider that practice. So it can be that simple. Um, if you're composing, you can walk around and sing. Like Beethoven used to do that, right? you know, like you can engage. Music is something you can engage with anytime, anywhere, no matter what you're doing. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm going for a run, and the rhythm of my run inspires words or melodies just in my head, and sometimes I'm able to remember those and take them back to the instrument. Um, so I always like to start off the lessons by saying, um, how to go this week. What did you get a chance to work on? And sometimes there's a natural progression from last lesson. Okay, we already know what we're going to work on in this lesson, but
Mhm.
maybe we just finished something, or we're looking to learn more skills, and we want to add on to the skill we're doing. I like to say, well, is there anything that you'd like to learn? Like, what would you like to do? I always like to make sure that I'm doing the style of music that my students interested in. Like, if someone hates bluegrass, like, why would I suggest a bluegrass song to them, right?
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't make sense. That would be forced. But what I find is, as we go into the interests of the student, after some time, it's easier to like bring other things in too. Like, a lot of students might be opposed to classical at the beginning, and I'm not a classical guitarist, but I like classical. But after a while, I can say, hey, like, some of these melodies are really nice, and it might be a good way to work on this specific finger technique, for example, that we were trying to do in this other non-classical song. Do you want to try it? And they're like,
Awesome.
sure. And then sometimes they end up enjoying like this new journey that we take. But I try to do more discovering what they like and uncovering than suggesting and forcing. Of
Mhm.
course, there's times where it's necessary for me to take the initiative to suggest something a little more, but I try to always make sure uh, that the student understands that it's their own personal journey, and I'm their guide in their own journey. Like, to have someone to ask questions to, that their own exploration is going to be able to teach them a lot more than me just lecturing at them, because that's how people hear something and it doesn't fully stick, and it goes out, if that makes sense.
Yes,
So
that
a big
definitely
part
makes
of my
sense.
motivation is, yeah, it's internal, and I make sure to keep it fun, because the second music feels like a chore and oh, we're just doing scales all day, like that's when people aren't practicing as much, and they're bored, and uh, they're looking at the guitar like I don't want to do that with the guitar. I want to sound like this person that I listen to on YouTube is really good, who just looks like they're having fun all the time. So that's a big part of my philosophy, is keeping it interesting for each student, and that's it's not always the same for everybody, especially
So
age differences.
yeah, so speaking of keeping it interesting and keeping it fun and still being able to have progression for the students, did you make any kind of curriculum that you follow or that you use as a guide, or do you kind of wing it for student to student, or how does that work for you?
I don't have anything official or anything set. I generally like the intro track for everybody is pretty similar. So I generally start off with people, and anyone watching this that might sign up for a future lesson, for example, like you'd be doing this, especially someone who's never played. Big part of my philosophy is I find like I have an issue with a lot of the music education out there that for like string instruments that starts off just chords right away, because especially for kids, but people of all ages, switching chords, I'm moving all my fingers at once, which means not only do I have to be able to push down one note, but I have to push down three notes, maybe six notes,
Yep.
right? And if I haven't even learned to push on one note, how am I going to then remember this pattern with multiple fingers, and then this pattern with multiple fingers, and keep a rhythm on this hand, and switch this in time, so you're not switching like this. Okay, what's the next one? What's the next one? Oh, what's the next one? That's what makes people quit. Is when they're like, "That's not rhythmic. What I just did, right? That doesn't sound rhythmic or continuous."
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
that's
why a
how
lot
I
of people
learned. Yeah.
quit, because they're like, yeah, they're like, no. So I start off um, with a version of Happy Birthday that I wrote out, and I wrote it out on just one string. I wrote it out specific on the G string, but you can do it on any string. Since it's on one string, that's changing the key. But it's on the G string because then once we learn the chords later on, the chords are pretty easy too in that key. But sometimes I say, oh, you can end it with a C chord. So it's a way to throw in a chord. Not that's not how we first learn it, but later on I say, oh, we can end it with a C chord. That's all in one string. And as a beginner, it is appropriate, especially in the first month, to just use one finger till we get used to using more fingers. But it's a good vehicle because this part, the frets are close. So then later on, I can say, okay, let's try to use two fingers. So one's prepared. So it becomes this vehicle to then learn these other skills. So I start off pretty much everybody with that, unless someone starts off and they're already um, at a different level. Then it's going to be a little bit different. But pretty much everyone gets started off with that exact melody, that exact song. And even when I did piano, I still did the same thing. Um, because in one lesson, you'll be able to come away with a tune, and sometimes we only get through half of it, depending on how difficult it is for people. But like you come away with a tune that you know by heart, that everyone around you knows by heart, that you're gonna know if you messed up on a note. But it's also all you have to do is recognize numbers on the fretboard.
Yeah.
You don't have to go, oh, I need this finger here, this finger here, and this finger here. Oh, like I'm getting dead strings. So it becomes this vehicle for. Sometimes we spend the whole first lesson just playing that very first fretted note, making that sound. So um, I tend to be very similar at the beginning, especially for people that don't have much experience, and then I broaden out because some people want to learn church music, and some people want to learn, like ACDC, and some people want to learn, uh, like, folk, like Riptide. That's not folk. Like chord strummy things, and some
Oh
people want to
yes.
do this or that. Um, so some people, I have a student doing classical music, so everybody is kind of different, and I, I again want to keep it interesting. So I use at the beginning some tunes, easy kids tunes like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and stuff. But I'm very upfront with people. Like, um, I'll say, like, we're doing these as vehicles to learn some of these basic skills so that we can branch out as soon as possible
Yes.
into a tune that you're actually interested in. And sometimes that happens sooner than later, but
Hmm.
it's a big thing for me, especially on ukulele. Like a lot of kids, like every beginner ukulele thing is chords, 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 chords. And a lot of kids like struggle with how that's like doing 100 things at once. But like single note melodies, I find are pretty universally simple for everybody. There are some people
Yes.
that it's the opposite, but it's like 5% of people, 10% of people, in my experience, that do better with chords first. Most people do better with single note melodies first. We build the skills, we build the callus, we can bring in other fingers, and then we can do chords. Or we stick with
Interesting.
melody, or we could, so there's a lot of routes to take. But
That's an interesting
first you,
approach. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because string instruments, we're literally learning how to push metal into our skin. It's a little unnatural at the beginning, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. It sounds like you're able to tailor your approach to different types of students. Like when I went to my physical classes for my guitar, the first thing I think we learned was chord progressions, and I think the first song we learned was "California Stars" by Wilco, and then we did something
Huh.
else, Cinda Williams. So sure, not the easiest, but yeah, we were doing it in groups and things like that. Learning single string sounds like it would be an interesting progression for some of the folks that struggled. Like myself, I mean, I struggled at first to figure it out. It takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
practice to get those chords down,
Mm-hmm.
especially while strumming at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and to go back to the motivation thing, I think having successions and this, because I've worked with autistic people in the past too. Before I got into music teaching, I had some jobs with autistic people, and it's very similar. If you build little chains of success, I think our brains psychologically don't always differentiate between a big success or a little success. A success is a success,
mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Um, and so if you successfully push down the string for the first time, you're like, wow. And then you successfully play the first four notes of Happy Birthday, you're like, wow. And then the first six notes, you're like, wow. Right? We're building that momentum, right? Whereas if you
yeah,
struggle with chords and it's a 5 note chord and you get one of the notes and the rest sound horrible, you're like, no, right? And then you're right, it does take that much more effort and time and dedication to overcome that.
yeah.
You know, the thing in school that really got me started was this in eighth grade. Because once I played that whole tune, it's not a single string, but it's two strings, very simple. I was like, wow, I got a tune, and then I kept going. Once I got
Yeah.
chords, then I wanted to buy a guitar. That was different, but
That was
yeah,
dueling
I think
banjos, wasn't it?
no, Ode to Joy, Beethoven.
Oh, it's a
It's
joy.
really fast.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Yeah, yeah. Da, 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 da. Um,
I think
yeah,
that dueling banjos is based off of that too, in some way. It's got that same sound.
probably. Yeah, that's a good song too.
But all right, so that's really cool. Now, as an online teacher, we have to deal with reschedules and cancellations and things like that all the time too. So, what's your policy on that, and how'd you come up with it?
So it was really helped by the coach that I worked with. Um, but I'd say it started in the store. Uh, we pretty much gave the store is a bit more like harsh with makeups. Like they'd ask us. Well, I mean, in advance it was easier to schedule makeup, and I think the store was just like no makeups if you cancel last minute, and there were no shows and stuff. But that was in person. It was a little different. Um, Once everything went remote, especially once it went private, and I had help from the coach who had a pretty much like a pretty general sample policy that we were able to adapt to ourselves. That she highly suggested we use. Like she wasn't forcing it, but it made sense. So I took a lot of inspiration from that. My current policy is with 24 hours notice, makeup is guaranteed. Without, it's not guaranteed. It's still possible, but if things are really busy on my end, um, like if you did a last minute cancellation, like I might not be able to fit you in. So, and people understand, and every time I onboard somebody, before they even sign up, I've verbally gone over this and I've sent them a version of the policy for them to read over as well. So it's pretty clear. But there's been days where I had pretty much an entire maybe school vacations or in the summer or whatever, like an entire day almost of students canceling last minute. Like it happens, and it does throw off the schedule. And then that's like one, two people rescheduling it a week. That's pretty easy, right? But like five, six, seven, 10 people rescheduling it a week, that becomes a bit more of a Tetris game, and so I ask for as much notice as possible. And what I've noticed is all the families that weren't able to honor that have dropped off naturally. It just wasn't a good fit, and all the families that have been with me, um, and the new ones. I mean, I'm pretty clear. I haven't had any issues yet with new families, and the families that have been with me for a while. Everyone respects it, and they understand if they are, if it's a normal thing to cancel last minute. That spot, I'm not able to offer it to somebody else ahead of time who also might need a reschedule. I'm not able to use that time in a productive way for anybody, and yeah, people are really respectful of that policy and understanding, and it feels good for me too because I'm also very generous with my time. So I make up, I'd say, most of the lessons
Yeah.
that even are canceled last minute. Like I'll be like, we can fit it in. We can fit it in even on a
Mhm.
non-teaching day. Um, and
How do
I
you
also
handle
have,
scheduling like that then? Because like how far out do you schedule and everything?
well, people pick a time and we meet. We always meet on that time. I've had people say, we know 6 months from now we're gonna be in Europe or whatever, so we can count that off and do a makeup. Because I offer a few ways to do makeups too, so we can extend lessons. So if you do a 30-minute lesson every week and you're going to take a week off, well, we could maybe do two 45-minute lessons the next week. Unless there's the schedule's really blocked up, that might have to move that. But or we can do an hour lesson next week. So I offer some pretty flexible ways to do makeups that are pretty easy. And there's 4 automatic credits that come every year for months that have 5 weeks in them. So you
Mhm.
build up a bank of makeup credits as well. Um, that's helpful for Thanksgiving and Christmas, for example. But yeah, so the makeup is pretty smooth. It does sometimes result in certain weeks being heavier, and then there'll be a lighter week, but that's fine.
Okay,
It's,
okay. Yeah. And I think we can all relate to that. So scheduling is a tricky thing and makeups, if you can fit them in, it's awesome. That's more power to you.
mm,
And that's very good. So, how about some success stories? Like, do you can you think of a couple of success stories from your students? You said you've had some that have been with you for a long time.
yeah. So I have one student, and we mostly just write songs together, and that's really fun. These lessons are really fun, and she's just developed her voice. She was already a singer, so I didn't really help with that. And she's in public school. She sings in the school choir and stuff. She's a very talented singer. Um, but we have really been able to experiment with composition, and we're doing less and less technique and more feeling and song structure and composition, and um, the things that she's able to try, they just really work. And I'm often like the rest of the week having her melody stuck in my head. It's really interesting because I'm not writing the songs with her. I do suggest things sometimes, but I'm aware it's not my song. I have a part in it for sure, but is from her. So it's just really beautiful to. It's almost like being the seed planter, and then you water the plant. Um, that's really beautiful. I've also had some, especially young kids. This always blows me away. Um, a lot of kids have a. I mean, I think kids are incredibly talented at a lot of things, especially music. Um, the kids teach me sometimes, but I've had some kids develop their ear to be able to like pick up melodies, and I'm talking like 7-year-olds. Um, be able to work out a melody from a song they hear, like on YouTube or something, um, and be able to learn it. Whereas they were scared of doing that the first time that it was brought up, and then they're coming and they're like, oh, look at this melody I learned this week just on my own, and that just absolutely blows me away. And I've had some students, especially like there's one in mind, one newer student. I think it's been about 4 or 5 months, but it could be even sooner. I want to say he started in 2023,
Yeah.
um, which is crazy for me. We're almost in,
I
halfway
know.
through the year, right? But like we're already doing some lead guitar, and he came from almost nothing, So he's even had a couple weeks where he's like, I got really busy with sports or whatever. I wasn't able to practice, but then he's had some other weeks where um, he comes in and he's gone beyond what we did in the lesson, and we're doing some lead guitar and some rhythm, and then there's one other kid, and this was really interesting for me because um, he was into guitar, but he definitely was like very distracted a lot, and it took us a while, but we found a song that he really was into. And so he'd often be like, I didn't really get to work on the song this week. I didn't really play much this week. He struggled a lot, and a lot of the struggles is because you do have to put at least some regular time in. I tell people it can be as little as a few minutes a day to develop your fingers. We find this one song. And he's like, I practice, and he's practicing every day now, and he just made massive progress, and he's also doing the lead on that song too. So um,
Those are some
it's
cool
always
tip. Yeah,
yeah,
testimonials.
yeah, I love it when someone gets hooked on something that they like, and then you know, um, the work kind of does itself.
Yes, exactly. When that passion finds them and they kind of just run with it. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, how do you keep up with any of these new trends or developments in online music education?
What do you mean? Like, what are
So,
some
like,
specific ones?
different things that pop out, like one thing my son was into a while back was Google's got that music, what is it called? Music Maker, Music Lab, I think it is. He made
Band
some
Lab?
maybe let's see here. This I share it.
I think I might know what you're talking about.
Not Google, not Google, Chrome. Yeah, so Chrome. And so like he made these types of things where you could just play along, and it would share the music. Let's try this with this. You might see this and the kids play. Or there'd be something short like that. So like this helped him get into music personally. And I was wondering if there's any like tools or things like this that you might use with your students, or if you've got other tools and tricks that you find that work really well.
um, so it's interesting because I have some kids that are into all kinds of music and into some of the electronics, and when I say kids, I also mean teenagers, students. I should say students. And I have some that aren't, and I have some that we're taking guitar lessons, but they have a bass and a keyboard in the background, and I have some that just have a guitar, and maybe even just an acoustic guitar. Um, and I personally I use my acoustic guitar in the lessons, but as a performer, I tend to use my electric guitar and a looper pedal, and so it's like a pedal that loops you, so it's a foot pedal, but it records you. You can layer on top. So I tend to be a little fancy in my performances versus I don't tend to use that to teach. Um, but again, like I encourage anything and everything. If it's related to music and it keeps them happy, that makes me happy. You know, if it grows their interest, that makes me happy. And I tell people often, like, yeah, these are guitar lessons, and yeah, it's a bit much to jump around instruments like all the time regularly, but you can treat these as music lessons, and anything you bring in is valid. You know, because I have a student who she stopped playing trumpet, and I have another student who also plays trumpet. I'm a saxophone player, so I understand wind. Brass is a little different, but like I understand the blowing aspect of playing music as well as the strings. And that's really cool if you have the looper. You lay it on the guitar track, you pick up your wind instrument, and jam with yourself. So
Those are some interesting ideas, yeah, because you can definitely,
yeah,
I can see yourself doing a lot of things with that. Um,
yeah.
well, is there anything else that you'd like to show us? Like show some of the other ways that you can work with your guitar and show people like what you do with your students. We've seen
Um,
Happy Birthday, and some of your one string methods. Anything else that you've created that works well with students?
yeah. So a fun little game for younger students. This would be fun if you had a guitar, but
I
or if
know.
you well.
I'm like, give me another 3 months, and I'm gonna be in Bolivia, and I'll be buying a guitar while I'm there.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I always, if you have any questions, I always say this: whether someone signs up or not, like it's a blessing for me to be able to offer more music, to be a part of making more music flourish in the world. And so, please ask me any questions that you have about buying a guitar. About I have a document that I always send to people. Again, it's free with a list of items I recommend everybody have, such as these clip-on tuners. They're great. There's a few different kinds. This is a new one I just found out about. This tiny, incredible strap, case, all these things. So if you or anyone watching this, I mean it, don't hesitate to ask me any questions about buying a guitar or even other instruments, especially ones that you can travel with. I like this little thing because it's a little guitar and it fits in the overhead compartment of an airplane. So it's a 3/4 parlor guitar. So little tip there, you can bring this as a carry-on easily if you
Nice.
travel. Um, so keep that in mind. But this game that I do with kids is I'll hide the fretboard or I'll put the guitar down and I'll play a note. And I'll often tell them the string and say find it because you only have 12 notes in music total, and so that trains the ear, and it's fun because it then I say oh you go and you try and trick me. So we take turns,
Ah.
and sometimes I don't get it, you know, and then we can move on to two notes. I'll say it's on the same string, and sometimes some kids pick this up real quick and it blows me away. Some kids need a bit more time, and so I'm very patient. I give them three hints, you know uh, and that becomes really fun, and sometimes that can take up a bit of time, but
You're
it's
training
kind
their
of interesting.
ear. Mm.
Exactly, because even if that doesn't really give them a technique, right? Like, say we did that for an entire lesson, which we usually don't. It's a good warm up, a good way to, especially for new kids that we're still getting to build rapport with each other. But theoretically, say we did that for a whole lesson, and I don't really have too many parents that really jump and like, are we making progress? Like, I didn't hear progress this last week, like, because in music it's up and down, right? Like there are
Mhm.
some months where it quote unquote seems like you're not making progress, but you are, because some skills are a bit more time consuming to learn and
Yeah.
master. But the ear is actually a bigger tool as a musician than your fingers, and so that's kind of interesting because theoretically, if we were to do that for a whole lesson, that would still have a massive impact on their musicality, but it quote unquote might not feel like it. and then we make it a game. So I really like doing that with kids, people of all ages. That's really fun, and
Love that.
I
Yeah.
didn't see that anywhere. I just one day thought of it.
It's a cool
Um,
game because yeah, I went out
yeah,
and bought myself one of those little tuner things so I could listen for my vote and see it would show me because I could never pay attention enough or never did anything like that for myself to learn the note sounds.
yeah. And there's some websites for that too. Um, in studying music in school, we had to like they'd play us a chord. We didn't necessarily like with perfect pitch you'd be able to say that's a D, but like you don't necessarily have to identify the letter name, but we'd have to say that's a minor seven, that's a half diminished, that's a minor nine. Like just by ear, that we had exams on that, and
Oh wow.
that was one of my biggest weaknesses um, at the time.
Yeah.
So I understand how important it is because I've improved at it slowly but surely. And like I said, I mean, I don't do the chords yet with that many people. The full chord thing, that's a bit more, it's a bit much. But single notes, I'm blown away at even young kids being able to do it, and or they can match it with their voice.
Yeah. I
Um,
love your
but one
single
other
note
thing,
approach. It's really cool.
yeah, and I want to share one other thing that I do to make things simple, which is this comes down to chords. So it could be like these are called open chords, the ones that have when you don't finger a string, it's an open string. So open chords or campfire chords or cowboy chords, like these ones. You know, like these chords, and then bar chords are like this, where you're barring with your pointer finger across multiple strings. So bar chords are a bit more difficult at first. I remember it took me about a year. I've had some students do
Oh,
it in a day or a week or a month. It took me like a really long time, especially F, which is like everybody's worst enemy. F major. It's why people quit playing guitar. And so I've done a lot to break down these chords. So I say, okay, if we think about it from the physics point of view, this part of the guitar is called the nut, where the strings connect to the head, this white thing.
yep.
The first fret is closest to the nut, so it requires the most pressure to push down. It's the hardest fret to push down in general, as opposed to down here, we're far from the nut. It doesn't really require any pressure at all compared to here. You have to like push extra hard. So we can always move the chord up, the same shape. It's gonna be easier. Sometimes people get it like that. A full F would be up here. Certain guitars, it's hard to reach this. Same chord.
Yeah.
Or we could do just, I like to like cut off strings. Can we do the bottom three strings of that? That's a full chord. On piano, you often play three note chords. That's a full chord. Can we do these three strings? It's pretty easy. Maybe four strings, the four thinnest. That's a ukulele. If you put a capo, which is those clippy things, on a guitar at fret 5, and you only play the bottom four strings, it's a uke. That's the ukulele notes.
Ah, all
Or
right.
you could do just these without a bar, the thicker four. And it's almost the same shape without the bar, though. So that's very movable. And it works on the four inner strings, too, as a minor. So that gets us through, if someone's really dying to do a specific song, but it's all bar chords, well, I say, okay, we might not be ready for that, but if you really want to do it, we can simplify the chords. And then if that's even too much, well, we can just pretend we're a bass player and follow the bass notes. So there's always a way to learn something if you
Very
simplify it enough.
cool. Yeah, you just keep them learning the entire time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, all right. Well, before we get going for the day, do you have any promotions or anything you'd like to talk with us about?
Yeah. Um, so anyone who watches this call, I'm very happy to announce on my website. If you fill out the contact form, if you're interested in lessons, if you fill out the contact form and write in the subject online summit, that I'll give you a promotion for one lesson off if you sign up and register. So you get a free lesson, and I also always offer consultation calls, and upon request, I'll offer a trial lesson as well, which is a free lesson, no strings attached, because I really just enjoy talking about music and working with people and teaching. So, um, again, what I said earlier, like I'm always open to answer musical questions, help people get unstuck from the land of only watching YouTube with no one to ask questions to, um, as well as buying an instrument that works for you. I really like those small guitars for small people. My full size
Yeah.
acoustic that I used to have would cut off my circulation right here. So I like the
Wow.
small one actually. It works fine, and it's cheaper and all that. But it's great, good quality, you know. But I'll offer everybody a free lesson with the code Online Summit on the contact form of my website. My name is Max Weltman. I believe you can see it on the Zoom thing. I don't know if that shows up on the recording, but my business name is weltmanstudios.com. You can reach me at weltmanstudios@gmail.com by email. And Weltman is spelled Weltman. In studio.
Perfect. Yeah.
So free
Yes.
lesson and free consultation call if you're interested in setting up lessons and actually talking about it. And upon a registration, um, I'll give you a free lesson. So,
Awesome.
uh,
And we'll have
yeah,
all
thank you.
that linked down below here as well on the page for everybody. Max, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for like bringing your guitar to show us some of this as well. Um, I think some teachers out there are probably going to be inspired, whether
Mm-hmm.
they want to teach music or some other passion of theirs.
Mm,
Um, it kind of shows that we can do just about anything from the
mm-hmm.
online in the online realm.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely appreciate your time today and all the cool information you shared with about your journey as well. So
Yeah. Hey, it was awesome getting to talk with you as well. Thank you for the opportunity, and to everybody watching this, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it from everybody. But I want to say thank you, David, as well. This was really fun for me too.
well, thank you again, Max, and everybody out there. Stay tuned. I'm sure you'll hear more cool things. Contact Max if you're interested in a teaching, or sorry, into you're playing your own guitar as well, or if you know anybody who might be looking at doing that as well. So,
Yes.
all right. Thank you, Max. Have a good one.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye.